The room was quiet, except for the sound of our ragged breathing. Samuel's hands were on my waist, pulling me toward him as if he could fuse our bodies together. His touch was firm, possessive, and it sent a shiver down my spine. I wrapped my arms around his neck, my fingers tangling in his hair as his lips found mine, urgent and unrelenting. The hotel bed creaked beneath us, but the world outside might as well have ceased to exist. In that moment, nothing mattered but the heat between us, the raw need that neither of us could resist. I closed my eyes, letting myself drown in the sensation of him. The way his hands explored my body, the way his breath tickled my ear as he whispered my name. This was a dangerous game we were playing, and we both knew it. Samuel was married, a powerful man with everything to lose. And yet, here we were, caught in a web of desire that neither of us could escape. As our bodies moved together, the line between right and wrong blurred, and I allowed myself to forget, for just a little while, the chaos we were creating. Nathan's hands traveled the length of my body. His touch, gentle, yet filled with a hunger that made my breath hitch. He whispered my name, his voice low and reverent, as though the moment demanded silence, save for the symphony of our hearts and the rustling leaves around us. I let my fingers trace the contours of his jaw, his shoulders, his chest, as if committing to him, to memory. His skin was warm beneath my palms, and every movement, each caress, spoke of a connection I couldn't explain but could no longer deny. As our bodies intertwined, the world seemed to fall away, leaving only the intoxicating temptation of his closeness and the rhythm we created together. His lips moved from my mouth to my neck, trailing heat wherever they landed, and I gasped as he pulled me closer, pressing us together as though we could become one. I had never felt this way before, unguarded, exposed, and alive in a way I hadn't known was possible. The moonlight bathed us in a soft glow, illuminating the raw honesty of the moment. Finally, we collapsed onto the blanket, our breaths mingling and uneven. He wrapped his arms around me as if he could shield me from the outside world. I rested my head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, my fingers idly tracing circles on his skin. We lay tangled in the sheets, his arm draped across my stomach, as if he could keep me tethered to him. I stared at the ceiling, my thoughts racing. I knew this couldn't last. I knew it would destroy us both. But even as the guilt gnawed at me, I felt a flicker of satisfaction. I had Samuel completely, and for now, that was enough. The weight of reality loomed just beyond the clearing. But here, in his embrace, I allowed myself to exist in the fragile, fleeting perfection of now. For a few precious moments, I was free. Free from expectations, free from judgment, and free to simply be with him. My name is Alina Parker, and I am the other woman. People like to label me that, as if it explains everything. as if it absolves the rest of the world from any responsibility. The truth is more complicated. Samuel and I didn't plan for this to happen. It just did. Or at least, that's what I tell myself on the nights when I can't sleep. I met him through his son, Oliver. Oliver and I had been seeing each other casually. Long dinners, polite kisses. The kind of relationship that felt safe but hollow. When I was introduced to Samuel, something shifted. His presence was magnetic, his gaze lingering on me longer than it should have. I pretended not to notice, but deep down I was intrigued. He was older, confident, and dangerous in a way that made my heart race. It started innocently enough. A private conversation at a party, a touch that lingered too long. But it wasn't long before the tension between us became unbearable. One night, after a charity event, he followed me to the terrace. "This is wrong," I said, even as I let him take my hand. "Yes," he replied, his voice low and certain. "But it feels inevitable." And he was right. From that moment on, there was no going back. A few days later, he invited me to his office. The risk heightened the thrill, the possibility of discovery only fueling our desire. Samuel locked the door behind us, and before I could say a word, his lips were on mine. There was an urgency to him, a desperation that matched my own. He lifted me onto his desk, papers scattering to the floor as he pushed everything aside to make room for me. His hand slid beneath my blouse, their warmth sending a jolt of electricity through me. I clung to him, my legs wrapping around his waist as he leaned into me, his breath hot against my skin. The room smelled of leather and cedar, the scent mingling with the undeniable heat of our connection. Every kiss, every touch, felt like an unspoken confession, a plea to keep holding on despite the inevitable fallout. Afterward, we sat in silence, the weight of what we had done settling over us. Samuel's head rested in his hand, his shoulders tense, while I straightened my clothes, trying to regain a semblance of composure. "We have to stop this," he murmured, his voice strained. But even as he said it, I saw the truth in his eyes. He didn't want to stop any more than I did, and neither did I. The affair spiraled, consuming us both. Oliver began to notice my distance, and Samuel's wife grew suspicious of his late nights. The guilt was suffocating, but the pull between us was stronger than anything I'd ever known. We couldn't stay away from each other, even as we watched the walls closing around us. In the end, everything fell apart. The truth came out, shattering the fragile lives we'd built. Samuel lost his family, his career, and the respect he had spent years earning. And I walked away carrying the weight of our distraction with me. I didn't love him, not really. But for a brief moment, I had him completely, and that was all I'd ever wanted. Now, all that remains is the damage we left behind.